Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Exorcise Your Rights. Today's guest is Brianna Malotke. She's a writer and member of the Horror Writers Association based in the Pacific Northwest. She's also the co-chair of the HWA Seattle chapter, and her most recent work can be found in Darktown, Lost Souls, the Nottingham Horror Collective, and HorrorScope, a Zodiac Anthology. That's actually on my to-read list, that one.
Oh,
She has horrifying poems and short stories in the anthologies Beautiful Tragedies 2, The Dire Circle, I can say that, The Dire Circle, Out of Time, Their Ghoulish Reputation, Holiday Leftovers, and Under Her Skin. In August 2023, her debut poetry collection came out, Fashion Trends Daily Ends, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So welcome, Brianna. I'm so excited to have you on the
yay.
show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you've written this poetry book, and
Yes.
it's really interesting concept because it's about the horrible things that we do to ourselves for beauty.
It is, yes. More historical, though, not recent.
Yeah. So I mean, we probably still do that, but fortunately, we're over the lead paint on our
Yes.
faces stage. Tell me a little bit about this book and what inspired you to write it.
Yeah, so my background is actually in apparel and costume design. And so one of the things that I love to do with costuming is the research. And I've been really lucky to get to costume a lot of more historical plays. And so really trying to deep dive into historical accuracies and all of that. I just find all these little fun facts. I'm like, I can't believe they did that. And I was like, let me keep that, store that little information away. And then I was kind of thinking about, a poetry collection. I've done all these different anthologies and, my stuff's out there. And I was like, I don't really think there's anything like this. And
Hmm.
I mean, it's something that I'm really interested in. I'm a little bit passionate about fashion history. And so I was like, I mean, those late nights in the sewing lab, you're alone in a room full of mannequins, like all the little daydreams, it's just kind of nightmare inducing sometimes.
Very
And so
creepy.
I was like, I think this book can kind of, anyone that wants a little bit of that likes fashion history might like it. Anyone that just likes body horror, they would love it. So I was really wanting to combine my two loves, my body
Yeah.
horror poetry and then fashion. And I thought this was a
Yeah.
really good blend.
This is an awesome blend because you're right. It's a very unique kind of collection. At first, when I was reading about it, I thought it was nonfiction. But it is. It's nonfiction
Yeah.
poetry.
So the way it's laid out, it's category in order is from head to toe. And so like we start with hats and then there's wigs, makeup, going down all the way to shoes. And so each section actually starts with a illustration and oh my gosh. I have this background on. So it starts with an illustration and then the research that inspired that section. And
Oh,
so,
fabulous.
you know, it does give you that nonfiction research
Yeah.
and then like a little illustration in your head to help you because one of the things I worked with my publisher on were those illustrations because there were
Hmm.
a couple that they sent me and I was like, that's not actually period accurate. And it's really important to me that it is. And so,
Yeah.
um, that's kind of the the poetry is inspired by these real life facts, like people did these.
Yeah. So this is real. This is nonfiction horror, self-induced nonfiction horror.
Yes.
Yeah. I know we're going to end with poem about the Radium Girls.
Mhm.
What are some of the other kind of things, or could you talk to us about the Radium Girls first?
Yeah. Radium Girls is probably something that most people are gonna recognize, like, "Oh, I already know that."
Hmm.
Just because there's the movie, there's books about it, like, people know that radium was used in the paint, and the girls that painted these watches would lick their paintbrushes, to make it finer to paint. And so these women in these different towns were dying. They were getting jaw cancer, losing teeth, their hands were turning green. Um, they didn't know what was going on. And,
Yeah,
eventually enough deaths occurred and they figured out like, oh, there's this connection. Uh,
yeah.
so that's probably one of the more recognizable bits.
Well, which is very exciting for me because I actually just learned about that probably a month ago, maybe a little bit longer. Somebody said something. I thought it was a band. I was like, the Radium
Oh,
Girls. That's a great sounding band name. Let me read about
I would
this.
listen to them, yeah, like a little
Oh,
folk. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, so that's the poem that you're reading at the end of this.
Mhm.
And I loved it because you're not very obvious with it, but you do know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
What are some of the other fashion
Yeah, so, of course, there's
horrors?
the mercury poisoning that the milliners experienced. Everyone thinks of the Mad Hatter and Alice in
Yeah,
Wonderland. As someone who went through millinery and can make hats from that whole process, I was like, "This is wild." Like, thank goodness we're all past that.
yeah.
Some of the more kinda grisly things, I think, people would have their eyelashes sewn, so, like, either, like, fur or human hair to make their eyelashes more full. It was often without anesthetic
Oh,
and could cause blindness because it was just like a needle and human hair getting threaded
oh my
just to have
goodness.
fuller eyelashes.
So
Uh,
actually in the eyelid, they would actually sew that in the eyelid? Oh my goodness.
mhm.
I would have
Uh,
been the ugliest person because 'cause I'd be like, "Oh, no, that is not
right?
happening."
I'm like, I would deal with that. Um, I have a whole section on corsetry. That's something that I love. I studied corsetry at the London College of Fashion. And obviously, people just think of the tinier and tinier waists and the shifting of organs and all of that. But it was also rumored that in addition to like the corsetry, people would have rib removals to have an even smaller waist with the
Oh my
corset.
goodness.
And that was just like a little rumor. They were like, we can't accurately say that this person died because they had their ribs removed to wear a smaller corset, but people
Wow.
talked about it.
Yeah. Yeah, you
So,
know somebody if anybody talks about it, somebody did it at
yeah,
some point. I
you
wonder
know,
what that would do to, like, say, having children, you know what I mean? You're
right.
messing up
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. In addition to then you're wearing the corset all the time and your organs have moved, you have spine issues, just wild.
Yeah. Oh my
You know,
goodness.
there's a lot of fire in here. Um, there's a whole like tool in ballerinas because of the way the tool was treated with starch and everything. And during that time period, all the theaters used candles.
Oh,
Uh, there were a lot of ballerina-related deaths because they would catch on fire.
oh my goodness.
Um, you know, there's a lot of fire based on large, panniers that that go directly out from your hips, wigs that are exaggeratedly high,
Yeah.
um, a lot of poisonous dyes. For, a long time, we used stuff that got us specific colors, and they were super high in fashion, and then we realized that they caused cancer and made people super sick.
Yeah. I do like that now when we realize something causes cancer, it's, like, not because, like, so many people died, but because we've tested it and we've figured it
Yeah.
out,
Yeah, and,
hopefully.
they didn't have that back then. They just
Yeah.
were like, "Oh, we figured." They were just on the brink of, man-made materials and using chemicals to get different colors of dye, and, it
Yeah.
was a very exciting time, and a lot of people died.
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah, it has a little bit of everything. I think, some of my favorites are with the eyes just because, um, there's something about just the thought of the different eye things. Like, I
Oh,
don't think
yeah.
I would do anything to risk that.
Yeah. Well, just the sewing of human hair or fur into
Right,
your eye, you're on your
and you're
eyelids.
fully awake, and so
That
someone's doing this,
yeah.
and
That's like a torture. Like, "Tell me your secret base or I'll sew these eyelashes onto
I
you."
know.
I would tell.
Yeah, so
Oh my goodness. Do you have Can you read us one of your horrific eye poems? And I mean horrific as in the poem
Yeah.
is good, but that's
Mhm.
pretty horrific.
Yeah, let me see. Let me find the eye section.
Yeah, that is so nuts to think of doing that. I mean,
Yeah, let me find okay.
hey, and I'm actually gonna give you the whole stage.
Ooh, okay, let me pick a good one.
Ugh, my eyes actually hurt right now. They're like, "No, no."
Okay,
Okay.
I will read Dazzling Eyes. And so
Ooh.
again, this is inspired by in the late 1890s, eyelashes were sewn on with human hair. So like
And
you get that bit of research in
ugh,
the
so horrific. Alright, so we're gonna hear this. I'm gonna go rub my eyes a little bit while I'm listening, and if you're listening and you're like, "I need this book," the link is in the description.
Okay. Dazzling Eyes is the title. She stared into the mirror, really concentrating on the face staring back at her, the reflected eyes a hazel with flecks of gold mixed within, yet not alluring enough. Her smile was lovely, or so they all said, with lips soft and supple. Her reflection smiled at her, with eyes blank and lacking something. It was all the rage to have dazzling eyes, to blink and smile and catch the attention of a beau, to be the belle of any ball, to be luminous. With with determination and beauty on her mind, she set out for the latest fashion trend, and without any kind of numbing or anesthesia, she did it. Through pain and tears, she had new dazzling lashes, thick and heavy on her eyes. The bleeding would stop, the small stitches hidden in her lids. She stared into the mirror, through hazy glimpses, the lashes oozing. Everything was a bit clouded, but through the small slits of her vision, her reflection looked beautiful.
Mm. So this is my good face, like, that was a beautiful poem, but also like,
And so that one kinda skips over the actual sewing part,
yeah,
but
but still to think of tiny stitches in your eyes,
mhm.
I don't wanna, like, be pointing my fingers at anybody, but what monsters would do that?
I know. I know, I'm like, thank goodness they invented mascara and, like,
Yeah,
put a
no
stop to this,
kidding.
like
I know, if you wanna get really and I thought that, like, sticking eyelashes on, it was, like, kind of torturous
Yeah,
because you're, like, pulling on your skin, but ooh,
yeah, I've never used fake eyelashes, but
yeah, I mean, they
it's
look
the imagine like, just thinking
yeah,
about the weight of my eyes and
yeah, but
stuff.
actually, like, that weight pulling into your
Yeah.
eyelid because it's such
Yeah.
a delicate area. Oh, okay. Ugh. Okay, show's over. I'm gonna go curl up into a little ball. Alright, well, now that we've gotten through that one, what I'm almost afraid to ask this, what other horrors have we done to look good? I mean, and the
Yeah,
whole oozing of the eyes, like, "Oh, that looks fabulous. Ugh, let me just get those pus off my cheek."
right. There was just a lot of fabric related things that I read about. One of the things I learned in school, we learn a lot of rules around fashion history and why we have stuff the way we have it. And one of them is, you know, flammable, non flammable, like children's pajamas have to be made, like fabric has to be labeled because when there were, when before all of this labeling, uh, in fires, children's pajamas would melt
Oh,
onto their skin, and they were like, "Oh, maybe," and so different fabrics were created that could handle, that don't burn as easily,
mhm.
giving you time to kinda get out. But
Yeah.
so that was another one that I liked writing about was
Yeah.
the fabrics that caught fire very easily or melted very easily.
Yeah, well, because that would make it so you couldn't even escape. Like if you're, because the heat can like really build up in a fire. And then if your clothes are melting on you, you're not going to, like the door could be right there, but you are in such agony, you're not going to be able to go for it.
Yes, and there was a whole in my research, like a whole section of like mortician recommended ads for fabrics because of these children's deaths. And
Oh
I
my
was just
goodness.
like, that was a very interesting time to,
Yeah.
so it was kind of like the late 1800s, early 1900s when this was happening,
Hmm.
like enough for people to realize, like, oh,
Yeah. And that was actually pretty common at the time that somebody who benefited from harm or death would be like promoting it. Like we
mhm,
think of that as awful now. I think that we probably just keep it more secret. I hope, or maybe we just don't think of it.
yeah,
Like maybe we don't act like that, but
yeah. So like there was this new fabric that was flannelette, and it was super popular because it was a lot more cost effective, but it was highly combustible, and that's what they were using to make pajamas and like night shirts and all of that.
oh my goodness, yeah. And where you actually have a candle, like you're
Right.
walking around with the candle in a
Yes. Like
kindling dress.
I think one of the ads was a child in a nightgown carrying a candle.
Oh
And
my goodness.
I was just like, that is wild.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I I enjoyed writing that section. So
yeah. Was any of this like did you tell like people that work in the industry with you what you were doing and what was their reaction?
yeah, so I had told a couple of people that I had gone to school with about it, and they were very interested. Not all of them are into horror, but they were like, they had gone through the same classes, or they were like, "Oh yeah, I remember learning about that or reading about
Yeah.
it." Um, and so they were like, "That's a really interesting take,"
Mhm.
because most people just you read something and you get the information that you needed from it, and then that's
Mhm.
kind of it. You don't really think
Yeah.
about it again. So they were like, oh yeah, like we learned why we don't use that fabric anymore, or because of that dye we got this. And
Mhm.
so they were very interested in my take on it. So
Yeah. Well, it is a very it's an imaginative take, even though these are facts, because you're dwelling on it and putting it into basically a story fashion of how would this have. It's one thing to read the statistic, this da da da
mhm.
da, but you're making it real for us so that we can experience it. So thank you. We got to experience the eyelid thing.
Yes. Someone will be like, "Oh, I can't wait to read it," and I'm like, "Let me know if you get any nightmares."
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and I think when it's real, it's even more terrifying because but to think that people willingly did this to them, I think to me that's the
Mhm.
most horrific thing, that
Yeah, I
they
think
weren't being
there's
tortured. They walked into it.
yeah, I would say probably half the book is stuff that people don't necessarily like, they weren't necessarily aware of at the time, like
Mhm,
that stuff was poisonous, or, blah, blah, blah. And then there were other things like the corset tree, and, um, there was a period of time where everyone knew about the mercury poisoning and the hatters, and nothing was being done.
mhm.
So there's a good chunk of stuff where people were very aware. They were making
Yeah,
choices for fashion to be in style. Um, and then there's just, a chunk where people had no idea what was going on, and it was really unfortunate.
yeah. Do you see any parallels today versus then? Like, how I mean, I would like to think that we're more safe now, but are we? Are we,
Yeah.
Brianna? Tell us if we are.
I mean, from the apparel industry part, fast fashion is horrible in a million ways, environmentally. Unfortunately, the people that it affects are the people that don't necessarily have a choice but to work there, use those products and all of that. But, it has more to do with because of how fast fashion works, and people are like, um, the length of time where trends are popular is shorter.
Mhm.
And so we have this fast fashion cycle that comes and it's gotten shorter and shorter. And so there are more cases of, you know, the like factory failures. There was uh it's been a while, at least like 10 years since like the one huge factory collapsed and it killed hundreds of people, I think. And at the time,
Oh,
it was
wow.
kind of a wake up call, but it still was not enough for everything to change.
Yeah.
But there are still like a lot of fabrics are more man-made. We're getting a lot more spandex and stuff.
Mhm.
And while it's not necessarily bad, it's some of the fabric combinations that are chemically created are a little bit more harmful in the long run. They don't
Mhm.
disintegrate like the natural fibers and all of that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
What would you recommend, because this is your industry, what would you recommend to us to keep it from being horrible? What would be the least horrible things that we could wear to be fashionable?
Yeah. I mean, the fashion industry is one of those things that I don't see any substantial changes happening quickly, but
Mhm.
just doing I am lucky enough that I can spend the time to research the brands that I want to shop for and and a lot of brands are more um open with what they
Mhm.
do, like where do they source their fabrics? Are they natural? Are they this? How do they dye stuff?
Yeah.
Um, so I'm lucky in that way that I have the time to spend to kind of research all of this and pick who I want to shop from.
Yeah.
Um, but another thing is I've thrifted, secondhand stuff for as long as I can remember starting shopping. So,
Yeah.
because I can buy something, I can alter it if like,
Mhm.
I'm a little unhappy. And that's another thing you know, the whole during the war during wars. I don't really think it matters which one. When there's limited resources, there's the whole, you know, mend mending your clothes.
Mhm.
And so I think, that's always just because it loses a button doesn't mean you have to throw it away.
Mhm.
If you can get stuff hemmed, so just like minor alterations.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's specifically more of a United States concept. When I went to
Mhm.
Australia, we were at a party, and there was a woman that had like her jacket had like a little hole in it, and she had stitched it up. And as a fresh United States American person, I was a little bit like, "Oh my gosh, she must be so poor because she's like got to mend and
Oh,
everything." You know what I mean? Like that mindset. And
yeah,
then
yeah,
later, I realized no, they just do that, and that actually does make a lot of sense. Like, why do you have to get rid of the whole jacket because there's a tiny
yeah,
little something in it?
yeah. Like sometimes if I'm missing a button and I just can't find, I'll just replace all the buttons.
Mhm.
It's can be a couple bucks,
Yeah.
and voila, you have like a new shirt.
Mhm.
But yeah, just mending and like using patches and all of that
Yeah.
is, just extending the life of your clothes. So,
Yeah.
like I said, it's
Well,
not something
yeah.
that everyone can do, time, money wise, but
Yeah. But you can pay people. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do.
mhm.
So we're friends now, right, Brianna? So I can send you my stuff. I'm like, this needs a
I
button,
think
and these pants are too
shipping
long.
wise,
Yeah.
I was,
Yeah. Well, what do you have any other favorite? what to say, like sections of the body or like from head to toe? Do you have another kind of favorite area that you would read us a poem from?
Oh. Um, yeah. I really like the ballerina ones.
Yeah, that is. I let
And
me preface
I
this
think
by
it's
saying,
just
as
my,
a
like,
horror writer,
yeah, I was like, I think, just from my costuming and theater experience, I'm like,
hmm
"I can't believe they let that happen."
I know.
You
Well,
know,
and think of
like,
how
it was
long
more
it
than
takes
one
to
death.
learn that. Yeah. Well, and it's not easy to be a ballerina, and so then you're just letting these trained, beautiful dancers.
Yes.
But the
Yeah.
horror writer in me also visually thinks that that would have been so, like, striking and horrible, to see.
Right, like, just a
Yeah.
person
Uh,
mid-dance on fire.
yeah. Yeah.
Wild.
So, yeah. So, yes, I would love to hear about flaming ballerinas.
Okay. Yeah, so the one I'll read is called Twirling in Tulle. Around and around they twirl, their cinder silhouettes casting elegant shadows against the hand-painted backdrops as the flames flicker from the front. The glow against the dancers, clad in tulle skirts and not much else. The girls continue to pirouette and leap across the stage to the music and the admiration of the crowd, until the screams of one ballerina echo sharply throughout the theater, and the crowd shouts for water as the smoke billows throughout. Around and around she twirls, trying to put the fire out as the tulle in her skin melts. Burned to a crisp, the newspapers will write, but still, everyone will come to the next show, the dead easily replaced.
Wow. That is so horrific,
Yeah.
especially that it's true. I mean, the poem was beautiful,
Oh, thank
but the
you.
topic is
But
horrific.
yes, so
Yeah,
yeah,
but
the way
also,
that
yeah,
the tutus were made, in the 19th century, um, the tulle was layered and starched, and so that process added flammability to the already, like, very flammable tulle.
yeah,
So they were just risking it all.
yeah, yeah,
And
literally. It wouldn't be
right.
break a leg, it's like set everything on fire, I guess.
So, yes,
Wow.
and that's one of those topics that, like, in my research, there were newspaper articles and stuff about this happening, and, there
And
was, like,
then
a famous ballerina that, uh, got she died from her injuries, like, she didn't die right away, but she did die from it, so
wow. And so not only died, but that's a horrific way to go, burned. That's a
yes.
very painful
Once
way
again,
to
where your
linger.
fabric melts into your skin,
Mhm.
like, I just
Yeah,
yeah.
and they
Ah.
ugh. Whew,
That's why I was like,
okay.
I want people to enjoy it, but I also imagine that a lot of people that read it are just like, ugh, like
But
cringing and being like,
yeah,
"Oh."
but that's
So,
that's good. So I kinda consider this poetry book like gateway horror. So people
okay.
who may be coming there for the fashion and the history are gonna
Mhm.
go, "Ooh, okay, this is also horror."
Yeah.
So
That's why it's kinda
that's
like it's I know poetry can be a little bit of a small niche, and so I think that there's enough in it
mhm.
for different groups of people to be interested.
I agree. I agree. And good on you for like what a great way to lead people into the HWA to be Halloween people. Because you're like, oh, we're just talking about fashion.
I know. Be like, "So,
Yeah.
do you dress up for Halloween? Do you like Halloween? So you must like horror. Do I have a
Mm.
book for you?"
Yes, let's talk about dressing up and or so what
Right.
fabric are you using in your costume? Because I can tell you the dangers of that.
Mhm.
Oh, that's so awesome. Well, I'm very excited to read this book.
Oh,
For
yay.
all of you watching, I know you're excited. Link is in the description. Tell me where we can find you and what else we can expect from you coming up.
Yeah, so as far as finding me, on socials, my almost everywhere. My handle is my first and last name. I'm very basic. So I'm mainly on Instagram and Slasher. Uh, what do I have going on? I feel like I've spent so much time on this book. I also write romance,
Oh,
and so
interesting.
I have a romance book that comes out in October.
Oh, fabulous. That's so funny.
There's no horror in it. It's just a cute little romance story. Uh,
That is okay because, like, to certain members of our audience, they would be like, "Well, that's horror."
right. Yeah.
Romance is horror.
And then, if anyone's in the Washington area, I am the co-chair for the Seattle chapter, and we have a handful of events that I will be at. We're doing a read with your local horror author with the Silent Book Club, and that's on November 2nd. So
Oh, excellent.
kind of a fun
Excellent.
little, you can come read with horror authors and then talk to them about what scares you.
Yeah, because we definitely wanna know.
Right.
Who doesn't wanna come read and cuddle up with a bunch of
Yeah.
horror writers? I
Or
mean,
find out what your horror writers read, you know?
yeah, exactly.
So,
Well, fabulous. Well, thank you so much for sharing this. We're
yes,
actually gonna end on you reading, now all I can think of is the Radium Girls. What is the title of this poem?
Alone in a Casket.
That's right. Yes, we're going
Yeah,
to hear Alone in the Casket, Alone in a Casket, which was read by Brianna. I urge you to go get this book. This is such a fabulous idea. I love everything about this. You've done such a fantastic
I
job.
am
Poetry is great. The topic is like
thank you.
interesting.
I'm pushing
So
for that Stoker Award.
there you go. We all heard
The
it.
little haunted house trophy.
They're very cute. I highly recommend them.
I yeah, I see.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I was like,
I am a little bit
"I
fond of
see your
them.
haunted house collection."
Yeah, which for poetry, so maybe this is like the lucky, like, you know, which I think it is this one. So we'll just rub it on screen, right? So, all right, let's listen to this poem and good luck with everything. I think this is a
Thank you.
fabulous everything about this.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can get this up and playing.
Alone in a Casket by Brianna Malotke. Glowing dimly in the twilight, the moon making its way into the sky, the cold darkness enveloping her body, its effervescent like glint noticeable with each and every passing moment. As the sun set on the horizon, her head became dizzy, the jaw pain, the toothaches, the unsettling nausea. It all made sense now. Staring at her hands, the green tint to her nails, too much to take in now. Her mother had joked months ago about how painting those silly little fashionable watches would be the death of her. Little did they know that those words were heavy with truth. Her heart sank, thinking of all the girls who had gone home sick only to never return to work again. Her name would join theirs in the newspaper, chronicling the deaths of every community member. Her family would mourn their loss, and her corpse would glow, alone in a casket, until decaying completely.